Evening all. In this video I'm going to be analysing the third James Bond movie, Goldfinger, which was released in 1964. At this point in my analysis of what makes James Bond movies so great, I want you to hold a thought, not just for this video, but for the remainder of the series. Okay? The thought is this: James Bond does not need no stinking exposition. Got that? We'll return to that point later. Now, in our last instalment in the series, I considered the opinion that From Russia with Love is the best James Bond movie, and I came to the conclusion that it wasn't. No matter which way I slice it, that honour goes to the next movie in the series, Goldfinger. Right now I can picture some certain contrarians I've known and met who are frantically trying to figure out a Bond movie that's better than Goldfinger. But all I have to do is list the things that trumps everything else. Goldfinger, Odd Job, the Aston Martin DB5, Shirley Bassey's title song, Pussy Galore, Sean Connery. To people who watch and like films, and Bond fans as well, these are the ingredients that are held up as the finest examples of what a Bond film is about. All villains, all Bond girls, all henchmen, and all vehicles that Bond drives are judged by the standards set by Goldfinger. Goldfinger is the definitive Bond movie, and even though individual scenes and stunts in the others have been more impressive than anything in Goldfinger, no other entry hangs together so well, and none have had all the constituent parts fit better. Goldfinger and Oddjob fit each other so well as villain and henchman. Your collection of big, blonde Germans and dental metallurgists haven't had the same sense of conjoined purpose with their masters. The Bond movie we're familiar with for over 50 years was defined in this one picture. Not only that, the movie improves on the novel as well. You see, in the novel, Goldfinger really does want to rob Fort Knox, and he is in cahoots with the mafia. Bond's mental arithmetic in the movie shows how problematic that plan is. Also, Pussy Galore in the novel is openly a lesbian, who is turned straight purely by Bond's virility. In the movie, her sexuality is a little bit more ambiguous, and what turns her to Bond's side is something far more sophisticated. Now hold that thought as well for now, because it's the crux of my entire argument. In life, I often find that you gain insight by defending something you believe in against someone who's out to bring it down. For me, I truly understood how great Goldfinger was as a movie when someone said that they could never enjoy it because Bond rapes Pussy Galore. Yes, the tussle between Bond and Pussy in the barn at Auric Stud. I've heard this argument over the years by some, but by no means most people who have seen Goldfinger. Did Bond rape her? Well, what we see is that she leads him into the barn to keep him out of Goldfinger's way. Bond says that her boss is mad. She doesn't care. So they judo flip each other a few times before Bond pins her and kisses her forcefully. She initially resists, but eventually caves in and kisses him back as passionately. Okay, is that rape? The answer is, we're not looking at the scene properly, if that's foremost in our minds. It is in the context of that scene in the barn where our answers lay, and if you remember from my series introduction, there are times when Bond's actions seem to distance himself from the audience, when we're for him, but he's not wholly likeable or enviable. Say goodbye, Dink. Man talk. Okay, so do we still have our two held thoughts? One, that James Bond needs no stinking exposition, and two, Pussy's conversion is far more sophisticated than the power of a virile man and unconsensual intercourse. Okay, here's how my theory goes. Goldfinger contains a hidden scene. It's not a scene that was filmed and left on the cutting room floor. As far as I can tell, it was never even filmed, nor was it an earlier draft of the script. It exists only in the space between our imaginations and the overall story, but it is most definitely there. It is a continuation of the scene in the barn, after Bond kisses Pussy Galore and before Operation Grand Slam takes place. It's the scene where Bond convinces Pussy to switch sides, and yes, I am speaking both literally and figuratively here. As he puts it, appealing to a maternal instinct. The clues to what is in the scene are listed all through the earlier part of the story, approximately between Bond in Switzerland, and right up to his imprisonment at Auric Stud. The starting point for discovering why Pussy changed his allegiance is a summary of Bond's situation up to that point. He is a prisoner of Goldfinger. He knows what the actual plan is, but he's cut off from making contact with the outside world, and in particular, Felix Leiter. His attempt to smuggle a message out on Mr. Solo's person failed, and all the other mobsters are dead. The only people in Auric Stud are Goldfinger, Oddjob, all the Korean henchmen, and they're not going to help Bond, and a couple of Chinese nuclear scientists who are Goldfinger's paymasters. The ethnicity of Goldfinger's stuff is important here. The language barrier, the divide between the Westerner and the East, the exoticness of them are all shorthand for Bond being unable to bribe or convince them to join with him. So he needs someone else he can corrupt to turn within Goldfinger's organization, and the only other person present is Pussy Galore. But how can Bond be sure she can help him? Again, the clues are all there. You may know a lot about flying, but you know little about guns. Bond can deduce that Pussy isn't a killer from that moment. The gun is a prop for her. Later on, she twirls the pistol about nonchalantly, as if the purpose of it is inconsequential. Yes, she could have shot Bond when she catches him snooping around underneath the meeting room, but once he gives up, she treats the gun with indifference. Also, Pussy is never present when Goldfinger has someone killed. She's leading Bond back to captivity when Goldfinger gasses the mobsters, and she goes to slip into something more comfortable when Solo's crushed body is returned. Bond knows what gamma gas can do. It's hardly the harmless sleep spray Goldfinger claims. But Pussy's called her part of the plan Operation Rockabye Baby, as if she still believes the plan is to put the guards at Fort Knox to sleep. Pussy shows a distinctly mercenary streak, and seems to be in it more for the money. He's quite marginal. Yes, but he pays well, as Bond and Pussy say in the barn. Bond, as the audience will know, is a quick thinker and adapter, so he can work out that Pussy isn't a killer and that she thinks Operation Grand Slam is to rob Fort Knox, not irradiate it. The problem is he's backed into a corner. He's alone. He's out of contact with Felix and MI6. Felix doesn't know anything about Goldfinger's plans and thinks Bond is just cruising. The gas will wipe out Fort Knox's garrison, and the bomb will cripple America and lead to war with China. Now, Pussy has led him to a barn at gunpoint, but he's going to have to risk trusting her and convince her to switch sides based on an assumption that she isn't a killer at heart and that she doesn't know the truth about Operation Grand Slam. So he does something direct and physical. He marks his dominance over her because at that point he is at his most powerless. Goldfinger has seen to that. He has to break her from Goldfinger's control. So after some judo flips, he pins her and kisses her. Now, I would argue that he doesn't rape her, given that after their initial kiss and her struggle, she gives in and goes with it. But it's also hard to win her trust if he had raped her. The kissing is, admittedly, rather extreme way of taking her mind off being Goldfinger's loyal employee. But Bond can't reason with her unless she drops her guard, and up until then he's had very little chance to get her to. You can drop the routine. I'm immune, she says. Now what happens next is the great unwritten and unfilmed scene in the movie. The bit where Bond explains what is really going on, and if Pussy needs proof, why doesn't she snoop around a bit? For example, where did all those businessmen get to? Who are the two mysterious Chinese gentlemen who command Goldfinger's attention? What's locked up in the heavily guarded room? Oh, and here's what gamma gas actually does. We can never be shown this scene because it would undermine the tension in the following ones, Operation Rockabye Baby in particular. We're meant to see all those soldiers fall down, apparently dead, and think, oh no, they've gone and killed Fort Knox's garrison. Oh my God, that's Felix and he's dead. Of course, most audience members' minds are already guessing that somehow Bond has fixed things and they're not actually dead. But in reality, it's Pussy Galore who has done this. If you're still in doubt about her motives, then check out her expression when she lands Goldfinger's helicopter outside of Fort Knox. She looks worried and concerned, and so she should. Bond's just turned her worldview of Goldfinger's operation upside down. She now knows that this is not the biggest robbery of all time, but that she's a pawn in a diabolical scheme to destroy America and slaughter thousands of people. She also knows that she'll probably end up like Mr. Solo and his chums once the job is done. All now hinges on Felix and the garrison getting their act together and Bond being able to stop the bomb. So now we all know how this pans out in what is probably the strongest climactic scene in any Bond movie. Ken Adams' Fort Knox set, the fight with Oddjob, and the counting down of a ticking atomic bomb. It's all wonderfully executed, tense, and hones Bond's improvisational ability in a fight. And it all still looks wonderful even today. Now here's a question for you. Did Bond deliberately miss Oddjob when he threw the hat at him? This is another subtle bit of storytelling you find in this movie. Note how Bond takes Oddjob's hat, but instead of throwing it at him straight away, he circles around in order to face the steel bars. He's got one chance to make the shot, but instead of a risky attempt to hit Oddjob, who might shrug off the effect of the hat hitting him, as he shrugged off a slug to the face with a solid gold brick, he misses and lodges the hat in the bars. Oddjob goes to grab his hat, Bond lunges for the electrical cable, and we know what happens next. So, was that a deliberate setup by Bond, or just pure chance after genuinely trying to hit Oddjob? At the beginning of the movie, Bond kills an assassin by electrocuting him. That sets up this final confrontation with Oddjob. Bond already has that earlier kill in recent memory, and it echoes what Bond is going to do now. A movie where henchmen are electrocuted at the start and at the climax of the movie. That's no coincidence. When you think about it, Bond setting up Oddjob to be electrocuted is more satisfying than just a bit of spontaneity, because we saw something similar at the beginning. Another action movie might have a quick flashback to that moment with the assassin and the bathtub before Bond lunges for the cable. But that's not what happens here. It's all done subtly. As I said in the beginning, Bond needs no stinking exposition. He needs a briefing, he needs to be shown his gadgets, and he needs only one or two bits of hints along the way from contacts before he gets the big speech from the villain, which is just there to tie up all the loose ends in case you've not been paying attention. The really clever part of a James Bond script are in the subtle, unspoken, or alluded to moments. We can't have Bond expositioning or hearing his internal monologues. We don't need him to pour out his thoughts and feelings to others. A Bond movie makes sense when it's moving along, not stopping to analyze itself. You will see moments which are often acted without dialogue or with the minimum of it. You'll see Bond's attitude to death in Thunderball, his moment of falling in love in On Her Majesty's Secret Service, his regrets in The Spy Who Loved Me and For Your Eyes Only, his awkwardness about his past in any Daniel Craig movie. But at no point will Bond stop to brood. His only direction is forwards. The scriptwriters know this, and they don't load their character down with navel-gazing. Nor do they feel obliged to highlight every key moment, or how a scene A links to scene B with massive underlining and arrows. Save that stuff for other action franchises. It is in the unwritten scenes that exist where we find real depth of the James Bond story, and our mind should look out for those moments, which, to others, may seem like gaps or narrative jumps. It was this first gap which took Bond from his early incarnation through to the saga it's become, and Goldfinger was the movie that did it. This is the cap that goes along with all the other ingredients that makes Goldfinger the greatest James Bond movie of them all. James Bond will return.